Ah, right, cool, okay. Um, Borderline personality disorder, my mum's biggest crime. Um, when I was 10 or 9, I got a Saturday job as a milk round on a milk float delivering milk. And a weekday evening finds my mum and dad in a pub with the milkman discussing my future as a milkman. My dad goes home at 10:30, as he always does, and my mum, and the milkman, with myself and my sister at the pub, stayed on to discuss my future as a milkman when I was 10 or 9 years old. To cut a long story short, we went from the pub after closing time to the milkman's house. It's not his house, it's his sister's house. He just has a room there. And well, my sister caught them in bed, started screaming and shouting, and that's how we were chucked out of the milkman's house. With my mum stark naked. And we've had to walk home along Tower Bridge Road. Yes, back then there was less traffic than there is today, but at 1 o'clock in the morning on Tower Bridge Road, back then in the late 1970s, maybe 1978 or 1977, but back then there were still cars that late at night that would drive down Tower Bridge Road. And as you can imagine, with my mum stark naked and my younger sister screaming at her a lot of horrible names that you can imagine. I don't want to use any insulting terms in these videos. I don't swear. So I'm not going to mention any names, but hopefully you are all grown up so you can imagine the kind of thing my sister was screaming at my mum when my sister had discovered my mum having sex with the milkman. So we've had to walk home with my mum stark naked. I am walking 10 yards ahead, desperately hoping that when people look to see what this noise is, they don't see me. Because along Tower Bridge Road, above the shops, I am seeing the lights come on in the windows because above the shops are flats. The pub, the pagoda that we had left just a couple of hours earlier, the pub was closed, but as I said, because of the noise of my sister screaming, lights are going on above the pub. The people who live there, lights are going on, faces are in windows, seeing what all the noise is about. Passing that pub, we have walked along Yes, I think it's still called Webb Street. I don't remember. But we passed Grange Primary School, my primary school, and the small house within the school grounds, which is right on the pavement. Well, that is the caretaker's house, the school caretaker. So at that time of night, with that noise, he is another window with a light going on with faces at the window to see what all the noise is about. And the block opposite, well, they are flats, they are families. So guess what school those children go to? Yep, you guessed it, my school, Grange, the school across the road. And all this journey home, my sister has been screaming, shouting at the top of her voice about my mum, with my mum stark naked. At least when we got onto our estate, she brought the level of her shouting down, but she still was hissing horrible things at my mum, quite justifiably. But once outside the front door of our family home, with my dad asleep, it is my job at the age of 9 or 10 to climb up the drain pipe, break in, so that I can let my mum and my sister in. Now, the end of, which is now day 2, when my dad comes home from work. Now, by then he has learnt what happened, And after he's had a good tank up on his drinking and come home and, wait, about you sleeping around last night, as you can imagine, slap, slap, slap. And my sister and I are both involved, slap, 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 because we conspired with my mum. We helped cover it up. But even not that, not is the crime, as far as I'm concerned. I mentioned how we walked past the school with the school caretaker being woken up in the night to look out and see my mum stark naked. Both my sister and I go to that school, so the school caretaker knows who we are, and the flats opposite, all those lights in the window, those people looking out, seeing my mum naked, like I say, they all know who we are. When I went to school the next morning, and as usual I go to primary school early because school is a nicer place to be than home. But going to school that day, it was like a Western movie. As I am walking along, this is the wall, and behind that wall is a school playground. And you have noises of children playing in a school playground, whether it's skipping, whether it's football games, whether it's singing and laughing, the normal noises of a school playground. And as I have gone through the school gate into the school playground, whoosh, complete and utter silence as they all see me walking. One obnoxious little boy, he was the first to shout, "Your mum sucked my last night." And from there, it was just torture. An entire school playground of children surrounding me, calling me horrible names, shouting out to me about the horrors of my mum and my mum being naked and my mum sleeping around. But somehow this is all my fault, with all my school friends shouting hatred at me for something I did not do. Now, the teachers, when the noise started, they knew, like I said, the school caretaker, saw my mum naked. So all the teachers, all the staff knew what had happened last night. And so when the playground suddenly went silent and then erupted in hateful noise and chanting, they simply didn't know what to do. And so they did nothing. They behaved normally. At the normal time, they come down to ring the bell for us to come into school. That's when they rang the bell. And that is what brought that horrific episode eventually to an end. That scarred me that day, not just in terms of how my mum hurt me, but it scarred me in the way other people hurt me when people call me names. And the worst thing about the teachers' failure to act, not their fault, no one had been trained for this kind of thing back then, but because they did nothing to stop it, they acted as normal. They gave license for every child in that playground who was calling me names. The teachers' inability to act gave all of these children and every child I've ever had to go to school with permission, allowance. They were given license to call me names, to tease me, to torture me any time, as often, for as long as they wanted. That is my mum's biggest crime. And I have a borderline personality disorder on the NHS website when it lists risky behaviours associated with borderline personality disorder. It does specifically list as a risky behaviour sleeping around and having unprotected sex. That is what my mum used to do. I do not care if my mum was ill. What she did to me, it should not have happened. What she put my sister and I through should not have happened. And it was allowed to. And I think I can happily end it there. I have explained my mum's biggest crime and why that peace she so desperately needs before she takes her last breath, well, she ain't having it. She's going to take that last breath knowing that I hated her so much that I would not visit. Happy meditating!